Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Mayor Pete, haven't spoken about him in a while. He was a former mayor of South Bend who was elevated to transportation secretary because of his love of trains.
Right.
The romance he finds at airports.
He proposed at O'Hare. Come on.
Mayor Pete, are you just pointing to modes of transportation and saying you love them? Yes, I am. I love planes. So the mannequin from the men's department at the Macy's in Mishawaka, who's now the transportation secretary, went on with about the intellect that he can handle. That would be Mika on Morning Joe to discuss the supply chain disruptions and what Mayor I can barely get it out. What Mayor Pete is going to do about those supply chain disruptions to get the Western world firing on all cylinders again. Take a listen.
This is a major challenge, and this is something that's been a major priority for the White House, certainly for our department. It's why the White House set up this task force. And what we're looking at is basically everything between those ships and your shelves that gets the goods to where they need to be. Part of that's things like physical infrastructure. Part of that is, as you say, is labor. And look, obviously it's an incredibly complicated situation. We're talking about global supply chains, and it's mostly private sector systems, but we have a big role to play, and that's why we've been convening all of the different players. For example, held roundtables bringing together everybody who's connected to the ports, the port operators, port owners, labor unions, shipping. And remember, a lot of this isn't, when you look at these backups, for example, on the ships, it isn't just about the ships, right? If they're in this photo, that means the ship is there. The question is what's in the way of the container getting off the ship and out to where it needs to be.
Wow. Deep thinking about global supply chains from Mayor Pete.
Dreamy,
go back to the men's
hero.
department.
Yes.
Go back to that Macy's men's department, young man. For more on the topic, pleased to be joined by Don Boudreaux, American economist, author, professor, co-director of the program on the American economy and globalization at the Mercatus Center at George Mason University. Don, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, Dan and Amy.
Task force and roundtables. Finally, I think we've got this supply chain problem licked.
I mean, if you have a problem, call in the Politburo or the American version of it, which sounds like that's what they're doing. That's what government people do, right? They convene all the parties. He was right to say it's incredibly complicated. It's far more complicated than any meeting of representatives of labor and ports and government can solve. The governments around the world, including in the United States, have disrupted labor supply. Both by preventing people from working and by paying people not to work. That's a major reason for the supply. I like to call them supply webs, not supply chains. The supply web obstructions, and so the government creates this problem. It's a government-created problem. There's no question that it's a government-created problem. And now the government's riding to the rescue, pretending it's going to solve the problem. It's just sickening, actually.
Right, you got, what did I see in Savannah, the port in Savannah, Georgia, 80,000 shipping containers stuck there. There was the backup in Long Beach the other week. Now, we have seen, at least last week it was reported, the price of these shipping containers had dropped significantly. I mean, still artificially high, but had dropped significantly, and that just seemed to be an indicator that maybe some of the blockages were being relieved, but maybe not.
Yeah, it's my understanding. I don't know fully exactly what the Department of Transportation has jurisdiction over, but it's about highways and it's about federal funding for railroads. These problems are not caused by a lack of highway space. They're not caused by inadequate port facilities. Although that may be a longer run problem. These problems are caused by the supply web disruptions that I just mentioned. We don't have enough workers. We don't have both to unload these things. And I saw a piece in the Wall Street Journal just last week. Some of these cargo ships are just being abandoned. It's amazing by their owners, and the crews are kind of just left on the ships because the owners are just literally leaving them out to sea or close to port. because there's nothing to do with them.
And it also,
it's more of a labor problem than a transportation problem.
Well, right, and maybe and so maybe that's something that some knowledge that could be imparted on the Biden administration with respect to their policies, because I don't know. I just sort of start from the premise that if these global multinational corporations that ship products from all over the world, the Walmarts of the world, if they've got supply chain issues, then it's probably something that is too sophisticated for central planners to come in and fix for them.
Absolutely. The people who have the most amount of expertise on these matters are the people who design and daily monitor and tweak these things. The people, the logistics experts at places like Target and other and shipping companies, not political appointees led by the Biden administration or appointed by the Biden administration. You're absolutely correct.
And also unhelpful, we saw oil yesterday hit a 7-year high, artificially so again because of Biden policy. And so you're making the cost of energy higher, then you're making the cost of doing business higher, and that's not good for the bottom line or for economic growth.
No, when you restrict supplies of anything, including, of course, fuel, you reduce the amount of things that finally get to consumers. And when you do that, you raise the cost of living. You raise the prices of things that ordinary American families can buy on their budgets. And that's you're right, Dan. That will be a consequence of these misguided policies.
Let's talk about that wealth killer that is inflation. I was having this conversation with a friend yesterday. He's like, everywhere I go, I see, prices that are 20 to 40% higher than they were a few months ago, and yet the stated inflation rate is 5.3%. And so, what gives? And my only answer was, well, here's how they calculate inflation. The mystics in the federal government, they take a basket of goods and they do a survey of Americans on a monthly basis, and they come up with sort of this aggregate, inflation number across the basket of goods among ostensibly a representative survey of Americans. So that's the formula they use. I can't tell you whether or not the actual calculation is accurate. I can just tell you what the formula is. What's your perspective on whether the number we're getting is the real number or something that is being sort of understated for political purposes?
Well, first of all, let's be clear. This 5.7%?
5.3, yeah.
This is high. I mean,
I know. Yes.
Yes. I mean, so even if that were completely accurate, we're still looking at significant inflation. We're looking at the kind of inflation that had people that in the 1970s quite upset. It eventually got even higher than that in the 70s. But this is high in itself. But I agree with you completely. I think that number vastly understates the rate of inflation. There are various things that inflation monitors, let's call them, can't detect. One of the things that I see just as an ordinary citizen, and I'm sure other people do too, is the reduction in the quality of service, the reduction in the selection of things. Waiting times at restaurants, for example, are much higher. Waiting times in some of the supermarkets I go to are higher. The quality of a lot of the goods that I get is lower. Pete's Coffee, for example, here in Fairfax, Virginia, where I live, they no longer serve any of their breakfast foods so that you can eat them indoors. So they don't have breakfast plates and proper utensils. They only serve it to go. It's a small thing, but those kinds of things add up. And so one of the ways that businesses respond to higher costs, well, one way, of course, is raising their price, which is easily detected by an inflation monitor. Another way is to reduce the quality of what they produce. And that's a form of hidden inflation. It does not show up in the official inflation statistics, but it's real because ultimately inflation means money, a given amount of money buys a lesser amount of output. And whether that amount of lesser output comes in the form of lower quality, that is I think evidence of hidden inflation. And I believe it's quite significant, but it's very difficult to measure, and so it doesn't get headlines. And to get to your point, it is politically convenient to hide this fact because we've been told now for quite some time that all this extra spending, all this increase in the supply of money by the Fed. Oh, no, don't worry. The government has it under control. It's not going to lead to inflation. Our masters are they know what they're doing. Well, they don't know what they're doing.
Well,
you cannot inject this amount of money into the economy without having these kinds of inflationary results.
for us consumers who have to go, the grocery store 2 or 3 times a week, how long is this high inflation number is going to last? Any idea? And what will it take to get people back to work so that you don't have to wait in those long lines because no one's showing up for work?
Well, that's right. And part of this is not a new point. Of course, part of that is because you have a lot of schools that are shut down or that are hybrid. So parents, or even under the threat of being shut down. So a lot of parents, even if they aren't being paid not to work, they're reluctant to go back to school because who's going to watch their kids? There's all this cash that a lot of these people now have that they feel they can wait a longer time before they accept employment and return to the job. So who knows how long it's going to last, Amy? But it's very difficult to predict these things in detail. But my gut feeling is that so much purchasing power, excess purchasing power, has been injected into the economy over the past 18 or 19 months that I think even the officially reported inflation rate is going to get much higher. I don't dare put a number on it, but much higher than the current report, and that the unofficial amount of inflation will be even higher than that. We're going to continue to get the supply disruptions, continue to get lower quality products, continue to experience longer waits in line at various stores and restaurants, and I think it's going to last for a while.
And now layer in this new global minimum corporate tax rate of 15% that the Biden administration is attempting to orchestrate, and they've gotten some consensus on the topic, even from Ireland, which rate is 12.5%. Now the footnote there is Ireland wants the 15% to be a cap, not a floor. But nonetheless, 15% global minimum corporate tax. Your reaction to what the impact of that would be were it to actually be abided by all of those countries that are signaling affirmation at present?
2 words: very bad. I mean, it's a tax on the major organization that produces goods and services for people to consume. It's a tax on the major source of high productivity employment. And the more when you tax something more, you get less of it. So you're going to get less output, you're going to get less employment growth from corporations. It's going to divert resources from more efficient uses into less efficient uses. It's not good. And it's so hypocritical. It's a cartel. The government now is concerned about monopoly where they shouldn't be concerned. Oh, we're about all these private monopolies. The market can take care of private monopolies. When they arise, entrepreneurs come in and compete the monopolies away. But when governments conspire against the general public, the media applauds it. Oh, look what they're doing. They're preventing corporations and rich people from escaping taxation. It's cartelizing against tax competition. I think tax competition is a good thing.
Yeah, and it's tough to keep cartels together, OPEC notwithstanding. So we'll see how that goes, how those promises are abided or not. He's Don Boudreaux, American economist, author, professor, co-director of the program on the American economy and globalization at the Mercatus Center at George Mason University. Don, thanks as always.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's like a hot, steaming cup of information to start your day. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
This is attorney Stephen Leahy.